Not Sunny Danforth. I'm Kevin Hoare, and I am here with the actual, authentic Sunny Danforth.
Yay, that's me. I'm happy to be here, Kevin.
So good to be here. It is the 27th. We are 2 days away from Leap Day, the day that only happens once every 4 years. And I always find that weird because it's like a day that doesn't exist. And people with that birthday, and I think I've known a couple of people that have had that as a birthday. It's just weird.
That is weird. You know, we're used to having one every year. And how would you like to be born on, February 29th? And, that's, yeah.
Well, it's always a presidential election year, too. So
it is. It is. And, I'll tell you, I'm going to tell on myself here because it wasn't very long ago that I figured out leap year always happens on the presidential election year. I figured that out. So I will tell on myself, you know what? We always have something to learn.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. And we also have quite a bit of idiosyncrasies to our calendar. You know, a year actually is several seconds short of a full year because it's set to how we go around the sun. And so that, I believe, actually is one of the reasons why we end up having a leap year and a leap day, is because we actually have to correct for the fact that we aren't really 365 days going around the sun. You know, I don't know, but they didn't pass this thing in the state legislature. I think it failed by one vote to change from daylight savings time. But you begin to realize that a lot of the way we measure time, it's a bit arbitrary. But we know that in Washington, D.C., it is always time to pass spending bills. It's like, what time is it? Spending time. Well, it looks like in D.C. they made a little bit of a boo-boo. And it was brought forward as a result of a Texas Attorney General, Ken Paxton, who secured a major victory in defense of the United States Constitution with a court ruling that the $1.7 trillion omnibus spending package was unlawfully passed by the U.S. House of Representatives in 2022 without a quorum physically present as the Constitution required. That was when the Democrats are still controlling the House of Representatives. And the court has enjoined the defendants, the United States Attorney General, the United States Department of Justice, the Equal Opportunity Employment Commission, and their officials from enforcing a provision of the Consolidated Appropriations Act of 2023. They should have put an R in there and called it a program, the Consolidated Respending Appropriations Program, because then it would be called crap. But
yes. Yes.
This is what it was full of.
That is.
But apparently this is going to protect the state of Texas because they just proved that it's imposed unjust cost burdens on the state. And I think other states are probably going to follow. There's a quorum that's required. The U.S. Constitution mandates that the chambers of Congress must have a majority of members physically present to constitute a quorum before most official business may be conducted. However, in December 2022, fewer than half of the House of Representatives were physically present when they passed it, with those not present voting by proxy. However, the Constitution is very clear about physically present. So when Joe Biden signed the illegally passed law, Attorney General Paxton sued and sought an injunction against the implementation of certain provisions against the state of Texas, and he won. And so he got to dance a jig here. And of course, that was under former Speaker Nancy Pelosi, who was using COVID-19 as a reason to pass the law without actually complying with the Constitution. And oops, you had to comply with the Constitution. This is big news.
You know, it is big news, and I give the credit to Representative Chip Roy, because he's the person who made the parliamentary inquiry asking about the quorum, and he's the one that truly caught this and said, and apparently it was through it was not the Speaker of the House. We had a Speaker pro tempore that was presiding. And the Speaker pro tempore argued that the quorum was present. And, you know, so kudos to Chip Roy for calling it out, following parliamentary procedure, making them stick to the Constitution, and the Attorney General, Ken Paxton of Texas, for them going after this. This is a huge win, that it's not setting a precedent. It's not allowing that type of behavior to happen in the House and in Congress, and making them follow the Constitution. You know, and there you are. Biden went ahead and signed it, and it was, you know, this is $1.7 trillion that they don't get to spend.
Yeah, and that's what they do. They spend, 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 and they don't have the money. So they actually are print, or borrow.
Yeah.
And that's going to be bankruptcy down the road. But to think that what they can do is play fast and loose. Do you remember when they passed Obamacare?
Oh, yeah.
And they did manage to pull a fast one there, because they the Senate then voted on Obamacare after it made some changes, and supposedly it went back to the House, but the House never actually cast a vote. They deemed it passed by the House, and based on, I don't know, somehow they managed to do that. And I wonder if they're going to try to pull a fast one on this on appeal, because deeming something as passed sounded pretty fishy to me at the time, especially on a big piece of legislation like that.
Yeah, you can't just deem it passed. You have to go through. We have procedures. We have a Constitution, and we have procedures on how it goes, and they should not be able to deviate from that at all. You know, You follow that, and whatever the consequences are is what they are. You know, you have to bring it back to the table or whatnot, and you know, it's important to follow the procedures that we have and follow our Constitution.
Yeah, you know, that's why we have it. And Democrats don't much believe in that. It's pretty inconvenient. But if a court decides this, effectively, whatever was done is null and void. And therefore, pretending like it's not null and void actually becomes very difficult, because you can't enforce anything you want to do in a court of law after that. That is the defense. So looking forward to seeing how this plays out now. But thank you, Ken Paxton, for standing up for the Constitution and for his own state. We need to elect some people in Oregon that will do that here. Speaking of that, we do have some members of the state legislature, Republicans, who are standing up against Measure 110 and for its repeal. The Democrats are squirming. They know that the polls are way upside down on this, that people literally hate Measure 110 at this point. They are so desperate to please the radical groups that spawned this measure and got it on the ballot in the first place, based on a country of Portugal that bears almost no resemblance to Oregon or any place in the United States, funded by a group out of New York called the Drug Policy. Is it the Drug Policy Institute or something like that? Anyway, that group, DPA is so I don't know what the A stands for, but I think it's Drug Policy Alliance, and it's a group out of New York funded by George Soros.
Don't you know?
Shocker. And they duped everyone into decriminalizing hard drugs, promising that they would tax cannabis and then provide drug treatment and mental health treatment and recovery. They didn't do the stuff that everybody thought was the benefit, the drug treatment and recovery stuff, but they did decriminalize it, and it fueled an explosion of addiction, crime, and homelessness that's just overwhelmed the state. And in many parts of the state that had none of this to the degree that it does now. Well, Representative Court Boyce from Gold Beach, he released a statement today regarding the recent news that the U.S. Center for Disease Control showed that Oregon has seen the highest rate of increase of overdose deaths in the last 12-month period, 41.5%. That was between, I believe, like September or August of 2022 and September, August of 2023. 41.5%. We beat everybody else in the country.
Yeah.
And you can see it on the streets of Portland. And that was actually after a massive increase that took place over the 2019 pre-pandemic levels of, I think, 1,500% increase. And so he's come out saying, look, we got people dying in the streets. This is being fueled by a law that has permitted this to happen, even encouraged it. And it's totally wrong-headed. It's time to go back to the drawing board. While the Democrats are trying to move the deck chairs of the Titanic around and recriminalize this, but doing so in a way that actually won't compel necessarily people to go into treatment and recovery, even if they're out committing crimes in order to fuel that drug habit, which is almost a necessity because it's a very expensive habit to continue doing, especially when you have no source of income other than being handed free stuff by the state, tents, food, water, etc. So, and there are young children that have died from this, just exposure, just poisoning. And Court Boyce read an account from one of Southern Oregon's district attorneys, which said of even more concern is the death of young children. This guy has been a prosecutor for 39 years that provided this input. He said, never in my career, up until the last 20 months, have I seen young children die of methamphetamine overdoses. In 2022, there was a 4-month-old baby that died. Later that same year, a 3-year-old child died of meth intoxication. I fear because of Measure 110, people are not even going through the motions of hiding their drugs, thus making it easier for children to find these poisons. This is one of the many crucial reasons why I'm supporting common sense legislation that would roll back the most liberal drug policies in the nation. And that's what we have here.
You know, we do. I'm so glad that Kurt Boyce is doing this. But what is surprising, it's so bad that now you have the progressive attorney general or DA, Mike Schmidt, endorses the proposal to recriminalize hard drugs. You know?
Well, what he's endorsing is he's endorsing his own reelection is what he's trying to do. But the Schmidt show has been going on for 3 years now, more than 3 years actually. And I don't think it's going to save his bacon, but he is.
I hope it doesn't.
I hope,
but now he's even saying this, which before he wouldn't. And it's because it is so bad. And the people, frankly, the people in Oregon are up in arms. The law enforcement is, but our legislators don't necessarily listen to the law enforcement, but they listen to the people. And this is affecting everybody across our state, all of our communities, equally.
No, that's exactly right. And it just so happens that Portland is where it reaches its apex, right? Because it's the perfect storm. It's the defunded police. It's the lawless prosecutor, Mike Schmidt and the Schmidt show. It's Measure 110. It's all of these non-governmental organizations and nonprofits that are out making pretty good bank off of administering services that don't actually get people off of drugs and off the street. And then you've got the Housing First homelessness industrial complex, which is raking in the dough, building things that don't do anything for people who are addicted to meth and fentanyl. And Mike Schmidt is part of that problem. And now he's desperately out there trying to say, it's unacceptable what's happening, and we need to take action to help those struggling with addiction. See, when I read it, it's like, that's how I think it actually goes in his head. I'm just it from his head.
Well, too, with this, when after Measure 110 passed, I felt like it was just people rushing to Oregon that could now do drugs out in the open, and nothing's going to happen to them. And yet I heard a legislator say, well, we didn't decriminalize, you know, public use. We didn't just tell them they could use it out in the open. Well, yeah, you did. You know, it's just a ticket that they're going to throw away. They don't care. And so that added to our homeless problem and our drug use problem in the state of Oregon. You know, I mean, we're the first state to do this ridiculous thing. And, you know, we're the test case for the nation. You know, let's see if we can get it passed through Oregon, you know, and
oh, we're the crash test dummy is what we
right?
are. Yeah. You know, it's like, let's see what happens if we do all this really stupid stuff that no one's done and hasn't worked anywhere. And, oh, looks like the crash test dummy bashed his head in. Oops.
And, you know, when Measure 110 passed, the next day, the newspapers and the media said that Measure 110, hey, drugs are legalized. The people of Oregon went, what? I didn't vote for that. Because it was trickery. It was foolery in the ballot title. People had no idea what they were voting on.
No, it was a combination of factors because the Attorney General, Ellen Rosenblum, who's heading for the exits here and should be replaced by Republican Will Lathrop if we have something to do with it. She actually enabled this ballot title to pass through and deceive voters. Yep. She herself has blood on her hands because of what she did. And because a big lie is a big lie.
Yes.
And a big lie that leaves people lying on the streets dead. The only thing I'll give Schmidt credit for is that I don't know what he's talking about now, but what he ran in 2020, when he ran for office in 2020, he ran on a progressive platform that included the promise of not returning to the, quote, failed war on drugs, unquote, policies of the past. No, he instituted a brand new set of policies that literally turned Portland into a place that $1 billion worth of tax revenue walked out the door and said, we've had it with this place. And it has people literally begging for a change. And so I think, you know, I just hope that there's that people don't buy this latest line. And he decriminalized a lot more than the public use of hard drugs in terms of his activity. He decriminalized almost all crimes, even to the point that many people who would commit felonies would not be held in jail. They'd just be turned back out so they could prepare their defense while going and committing more crimes. And
catch and release was definitely implemented.
Yeah, it was.
Under his watch.
And it was, and sometimes
let Portland burn in 2020 with, you know, BLM, and, you know, he has a horrible track record of actually providing services to the citizens there, you know, of Multnomah County.
Well, and here's two things that you need to know about him. Just earlier this month, when Willamette Week did an interview with him and Nathan Vasquez, who is his opponent in the upcoming elections for district attorney here in May, who Nathan Vasquez is a tough on crime guy who actually works right now in that office, but isn't allowed to do his job because of who he works for.
Yeah.
When this interview took place, Mike Schmidt was asked if he supported recriminalizing hard drugs. And he pointed to his proposed public use ban. So the whole thing like, oh, well, we didn't say they could do it in public.
Right.
Which he literally didn't arrest people for any of this stuff. He declined to answer that question. He declined to answer whether he was going to support. Now, he is coming out and saying, in fact, okay, I'll support it. But it's even more striking, this article says, because it arrives just days after Schmidt received a $30,000 contribution, his largest of all contributions, from the Drug Policy Alliance, the deep-pocketed drug policy reform group that backed Measure 110. You going to trust that guy when his biggest donor is the Drug Policy Alliance and George Soros? No, this is really where this is a Darwin Awards moment for the city of Portland and
Yes,
Multnomah County. You either figure this out, that this guy is a charlatan, and you send him packing with a strong message that we don't want anybody like this ever again, or you let him continue doing this and expect the city to basically just collapse at some point with this guy at the helm of the law and justice within the county. And of course, it hurts the whole city. I can tell you that neighboring counties like Washington County and Clackamas, who have district attorneys who do prosecute crime, they said that their criminal prosecution situation would drop precipitously by like half if Multnomah County just prosecuted them when they first commit crimes there, because they bleed over into the neighboring counties.
Right. It's catch and release, and they just go someplace else, and they're thinking that the whole state is like this. You know, I'm seeing crime is up, drug use is up everywhere, crime is up everywhere. But I'll tell you, in Portland we need Will Lathrop. But you know, it's,
and we need to end the Schmidt show, because that's at the heart of this, the Schmidt show. And by the way, I found this article from just earlier this month. It's really only let's see, 2 weeks ago. I'm going to put it in here. And this is, what should the criminal penalty be for drug possession? And so you can hear from both candidates. And if you know anybody in Portland, send these to them, because they need to talk into. I'm in Portland, so I'm definitely making sure people know. But
sure.
And also, it's a lesson. Like, let's send a message in Portland, because the rest of the state doesn't want this to sound like a good idea anywhere else. Well, shifting gears here, the U.S. military, as you know, Sonny, has struggled with recruitment, and they found a solution to the recruitment crisis. They're just going to cut the number of job openings that they're having in the U.S. Army by redesigning the force so that they don't even need more people. And you might say, well, that sounds like a good idea. It's good savings. Well, it doesn't solve the reason why they aren't able to recruit people. We'll talk about that in a moment. But this is their plan, is to reduce the armed forces in size. And you know what happens every time they do this? We end up needing that. We end up finding ourselves in some kind of armed conflict that we didn't expect and didn't want. And now we actually have to prepare ourselves anew. Now it'll take them a while to do this, until 2029, but this isn't a military that is being led by people who want to project strength so that we can have peace through strength and deterrence. This is being led by the likes of Joe Biden and what's the guy that disappeared at Christmas, the Joint Chiefs of Staff guy. And, you know, these guys, I don't know, you can do real permanent harm to a U.S. military and not have it when you need it. If you just start doing all this stuff. And they say, well, they're working through the recruiting challenges because they came up 15,000 troops short of the recruiting goal in 2022, which is, they're off 25% for that year.
So are they saying, let's see, we can't reach our goal, so we better just lower the threshold, you know, then we can get there? I mean, you know, is that what they're doing? I don't know.
They must have the same people in charge of it that are in charge of Oregon's educational system. It's like, well, we can't make the standards for math and reading and high school graduation, so let's get rid of those standards. And then look, we're succeeding now. Just move the bar.
So they're going to cut special ops and combat arms slots as part of its restructuring. Special ops, operations. Let me tell you, I would bet that's a pretty important part. You know, every branch, I don't know about Space Force, you know, but they've all got a special operations unit. And I would bet that there's things that they get to go do that are necessary for them to have that. So they're saying that they're going to scale that way back.
So yeah, let's get rid of our most capable, most highly trained troops and because we haven't used them very much in the last 20 years, except all the time. And
Yeah.
those guys actually keep the bad guys around the world afraid, because they never know when one of these guys is going to jump through a window with night vision in the middle of the night and shoot them all, and then hop into a black ops helicopter and head out again. And they're like, I don't know what happened, but all the terrorists are dead. This is what they are doing, is they're gutting this important part of the military, but they're also doing something else. And I think they are not cutting DEI. They're not cutting this bureaucratic social engineering BS overhead. They're not cutting all of the climate change reform efforts that cost enormous sums of money, to electrify the military, to do all these things that make it less capable, less reliable, just like we find in the civilian sector. They're not cutting any of that stuff, because they don't really care about whether these guys can kill people and break things when it comes time. Otherwise, they wouldn't be cutting what they are, and they would be cutting the DEI garbage, the woke garbage.
Definitely. Definitely. You know, they are expanding. Their plan is to expand air defense components. You can read drones. You know, it says the Army's planning to trim 13,000 spots from special operations and close combat force components. The service is looking to add 7,500 spots for emerging Army needs like air defense and counter drone components. So, you know, read that. They're thinking, we don't need to do hand-to-hand combat anymore. We don't need to have the boots on the ground. It's going to be done via drones, and somebody sitting in an office with, you know, one of those virtual things on and a joystick in his hand or her hand.
I can't disagree that new combat capacity is there, and it's going to be needed. We're seeing that in Ukraine and how that is taking place. But you don't actually reduce your most potent combat capabilities that you've relied upon and say, what we're going to do is just have push button warfare. It takes me back to General George S. Patton. You know, the reason why people don't mess with the United States in direct combat is because we are so potent and we're so capable. But going into a totally defensive posture where you're just going to sit there and hope drones will save the day means that we're not going to be capable of taking out bad guys before they do some of the stuff that they want to do.
Yeah.
And, but you know, this DEI stuff is more than just something that consumes
this resources. DEI is the problem why they can't recruit anybody.
It is. And on top of that, it is ruining some of the people that are actually in the military. Yeah. A U.S. Air Force member the other day went in front of the Israeli embassy, yelled "Free Palestine," and then lit himself on fire and killed himself. And you think, well, that's a very sad story, but he does sound, you know, maybe he's just mentally ill. He's 25 years old, and he streamed it live, the incident live on social media. So he was definitely trying to see if he could influence public opinion, which is not the job of people in the Air Force that are personnel. Their job is to be ready to fight in the air and to support our air forces from the ground. But here's what's really interesting, which is that within about 24 hours after this came out, and it's clear that this guy disagreed with U.S. foreign policy with regard to Israel and believes that Hamas is just dandy, which I don't want that person near any weapons system in the United States Air Force. But on top of that, Andy Ngo, the intrepid reporter who seems to just know how to get this information, posted later yesterday that the guy who did this, that set himself on fire, he is a member of the far left. His name is Aaron Bushnell of San Antonio. but he used an alias called Lily Anar Kitty, Kitty, an Antifa anarchist violent extremist propaganda site called Crime Think, which has been banned on Twitter and X for content instructing people to carry out violent criminal acts, says it received an email from this guy before he set himself on fire at the Israeli embassy. Now, apparently the group urges their comrades not to kill themselves in despair, but instead to carry out collective plans. In other words, kill other people. But this pro-Palestinian protester member of the Air Force apparently had a trans dimension to their identity, which, if you think about it, that's being encouraged. He probably went into meetings and training sessions saying, well, you're fine. This is really important. We care about your identity. Don't worry about being able to fight. Don't worry about being able to follow orders that adheres to the foreign policy of the United States. You do whatever you want, whatever makes you feel good, including harboring opinions and acting on those opinions that says Hamas is just fine. And then, I'm just waiting for the first time that one of these folks does some real damage, doesn't light themselves on fire, but maybe kills 1,000 of our troops. That's what's going to happen.
Well, we've seen this before too, when there was a fellow at a base and he was in the military, and he went and shot some people. This is going a few years back. And so by not, we used to pick the best and the brightest for the military. Then there was a psychological evaluation as well, because you do need, when you have a military, in my point of view, and I've never been in the military, but you want the mindset to be collective. They're on a mission. They're there to do a job. They're there to representing our country and defending us, instead of accepting anybody from everywhere with any type of mental illness, psychological issue, or that when the orders come, they go, sorry, I'm not doing that. Because that time will come. Nope, I'm not doing that.
And they're more likely to bounce out of the military somebody who is overly patriotic, because they'll just say, well, you kind of look like a right-wing activist here, so we're going to get rid of you. We're going to keep this guy in,
right?
Because
that was part of the DEI plan.
That's right, the DEI trans, I love Hamas personnel that we need desperately in the Air Force. This is and shifting gears back to Oregon. I didn't know this, but apparently there was a pro-Palestinian protest that blocked Northeast Airport Way near 82nd Avenue in Portland the other day. And of course, they tried to get people to be able to go around this. But this protest, you and I have both been on our way to the airport, sometimes not with a lot of time to get there.
Yeah.
And you encounter these guys who feel like they have some unconstrained right to block our access to that airport. I think that it's time that these people be arrested and fully prosecuted for disrupting the flow. And this is the airport is a federal affiliated transportation hub that's governed by the FAA. That is a serious offense to obstruct airport travel. And so I think it's time that we started taking action against that on the domestic front, because if you want to make your point, lots of people going to and from the airport will see you if you protest but stay out of the way. But if you block people's access and egress, you've violated an important tenet of our society, as well as frankly a constitutional freedom there.
Yes, and you should never be able to shut down any freeway, quite frankly, state, federal highway, because there's always the emergency vehicles that need to come through. And, I'll tell you, I would be quite in fear with a mob of people having shut down the highway, seeing what I've seen happen in Portland.
Yeah.
What's going to come? Are they coming and they're going to break into the car and beat me up or kill me and stuff like that? So, you see that. So I agree. And there does need to be consequences for those actions over here.
Yeah, these people probably should find themselves fined like $500,000. And they'll think twice about doing that if they actually end up spending the next 15 years trying to pay back through garnished wages a fine that they incurred for blocking someone's access to the airport. I think that's where we need to go. Speaking of constitutional rights, 3 Republicans in the House of Representatives, Lee Stefanik, Richard Hudson, and Andy Barr, New York, North Carolina, and Kentucky, respectively, have filed or put forward a bill that would restrict the use of a merchant category code to track transactions for firearms and ammunition sales, because this is being used to go after law-abiding citizens. It would preempt California's newest attempt to single out and surveil law-abiding firearm and ammunition owners. This is, of course, how California and states like that have managed to go after our freedoms, is by creating a surveillance state around something that is simply a transaction that you have the perfect right to do. And then using that to start tracking and then seeing if they can't go and be ready to grab those firearms from you when it's convenient to them and they find a reason or excuse. Yeah. And so it's the way Hudson put it here is, this is an unacceptable, dangerous, and first step to gun confiscation. They're going to put a stop to it. This is great. And apparently a bank that set up this code at the time, New York Attorney General Letitia James, the one that's gone after President Trump, and California Attorney General Rob Bonta sent a letter to 3 major credit card companies urging them to support the move of setting up this code. Governor Hochul in New York, running for re-election this fall, running for election that fall, gave her full support to this. 21 state attorney generals responded with a letter to the credit card company leaders requesting they not support doing it. Montana banned the practice. And so this is an opportunity at the federal level for us to do something. Yeah. And woe to the Democrats that decide to oppose it both in the House and the Senate.
Well, of course, the Democrats will, because they would love to have surveillance, all the surveillance of everything, facial recognition, surveil, they want to control everything, every aspect of our lives that they can. And so I hope that get some legislation passed that will shut this down. And kudos to the 21 governors. It's a shame that it wasn't 26, since we have 26 that are trying to help stop the flow of illegals coming across our border. It should be 26 in total that are saying, no, we're just not going to surveil people. What I buy and what I spend my hard-earned money on is not the government's business. It's not anybody's business. Maybe my husband's.
It is a violation, I think, ultimately of the Fourth Amendment for unreasonable search and seizure. There isn't a compelling state interest to do this. It is a fishing expedition is what it is. And that's what surveillance states do. They go out and they just start looking for crimes.
Show me the person, I'll find you the crime,
Yeah, that's exactly it, which is actually what they said in the Soviet Union. Now, speaking of something else that we have to put a stop to, you found an article in the Epoch Times. Rural America is set to be transformed by the 55 million acre federal solar plan. They're going to put so many solar panels, they're going to cover 55 million acres. And they're going to put it on our public lands. The ones that they say we can't go into, we can't harvest dead trees out of, that we can't go and try to mine or get fossil fuels out of that can help us get off dependency on foreign energy. They're going to put up all these solar panels and literally turn it into. I remember that Pretenders song from the 1980s, where they said all the farmland has been turned into parking lots.
Yeah.
Well, actually, the Democrats' plan is to turn them into solar panels, and it's something that's totally unnecessary because we could actually replace all of this with safe nuclear energy. In Oregon, we could, just on a few acres, we could actually get all the energy we need from safe nuclear plants that cannot melt down, that have safe ways of handling all of the waste and storing it, and can generate on just a few dozen acres the same amount that they're planning in Oregon of 200,000 acres of solar panels in Eastern Oregon, prime farmland.
Yeah.
So,
but another way too is if Oregon would reverse their 30+ year stance on hydro being considered renewable energy.
Yeah.
The feds consider hydropower to be renewable energy. And if Oregon did the same thing, well, let's see, then they couldn't have taken down the dams in Klamath, and they're trying to get them down in the Snake River and whatnot. But I also posted a story there also in the Epic Times that talks about the hidden impact of massive solar farms. And I'm not going to call them solar farms. They're massive solar arrays. A farm is where something is grown for human consumption, like we're going to eat it, right? Mm-hmm. And we're not eating the electricity, and they're not farms. They're not windmill farms. There's nothing farms about it. Also, it affects residents. Wildlife is affected, and it threatens aquifers. Water is a real big deal. But going to this, so I posted that there because that gives a lot of information about the effects of what has happened. People having health issues that because it's so much sand and dust is blowing, they're getting that lung disease, illness. I can't think of the name of it at the top. I read the article here. Valley fever. And it's compounding problems because it is drying up the land. So it's causing problems. It's draining aquifers, actually. They're not refilling regularly anymore by nature. But imagine, here you have the federal government is saying to Bureau of Land Management,
who can't put out fires, apparently very successful.
Right. Well, they're going to burn it all down. Maybe that's their plan. Let's let it burn, and then we'll put solar on top where the forest used to be.
That's right.
Okay, I don't know, but 55 million acres on federal solar, on federal land. This is their plan. And, our federal lands have been used for people's enjoyment, for recreation, many things, but it's been set aside for essentially people. And in my opinion, in fact, it's been used for farming, ranching, hunting, fishing, hiking, camping, drilling, mining. And this is China building types of projects, because that's where the solar panels are coming from. It's all components. Even if they're made in America, the components are coming out of China. So don't let anybody trick you into thinking this is not about riching. This is about riching other nations, namely China. We don't need this power. And it is, so the states targeted for solar development: Arizona, California, Colorado, Idaho, Montana, Nevada, New Mexico, Oregon, Utah, Washington, and Wyoming. It's all in the West. That's because where the federal lands are.
Yeah, that's where they can get away with it and where they're going to do it. And then, by the way, this is analogous to what they are doing, but starting to get cold feet about here in Oregon, because it's also under federal control. The what is it? The Bureau of Ocean Energy Management. They are trying to force over the vociferous objections of the people who live in Coos County, Curry County, in Oregon, which is in the southwest corner of the state along the coast. They're forcing in wind energy, giant windmills off the coast that will actually have a significant effect on fishing. It's detested by the Native American tribes that have a lot of influence and land in the area. And also, it's bad apparently for whales. And this is on top of the fact that it blights the view of a coastal area. And it will take more than a decade for to reach its energy potential. And these same programs have lost not just millions or hundreds of millions, but billions. There's one off the coast of New Jersey that literally went belly up after it was $6 billion in the hole. And as soon as the federal or state subsidies dry up for these things, they are not economically viable. No. So they're literally spending more money than the energy they're generating to generate this energy. It's a total climate environmental virtue signaling exercise that also is infuriating people in that part of the state. And it looks like some of the folks in that part of the state that have been speaking out are starting to have an effect, because Democrat legislators and even some of the people associated with the Bureau of Energy, Ocean Energy Management, are starting to get cold feet about this. So we can stop this stuff if we want to. And again, we mentioned the alternatives: water and gravity when it comes to hydroelectric, safe nuclear, developed right here in Oregon by Oregon State University engineers in Corvallis. We can do this, but we don't have to just march off a cliff and allow these guys to impose this over us.
No, we don't. And also, you know, this is breaking our state financially. It's breaking our nation. You know, the money that is being spent on this, if it truly could stand on its own, or very little subsidy, that would be one thing. But, you know, even BMW, the car maker today, says, you know, we're rolling back. We're not going to make electric vehicles. No, we're not going to do that. Well, we need to kill this and let this die and get our energy back from truly renewable resources like hydro. I'm not opposed to nuclear. There is new technology today that is very good from what I've read. I'm certainly far from an expert on that. But this is a waste of our land resources. Once you do this, the land is never the same. It truly, and the environmental impact. Let's see, destroying the earth to save it? Are you kidding me? I mean, that's truly what this is.
And it's interesting. We get these constant lectures about what we have to do to support Ukraine and fight Russia. And yet Biden has actually blocked the export of liquefied natural gas.
Oh, yeah.
Which we are the Saudi Arabia of in the world. You wouldn't need Russia at all if we just did what we can do. And Democrats have blocked Coos Bay, which is one of the 5 deep water ports along the Pacific that could be used to export this liquefied natural gas to Asia. And many of the countries out there are heavily dependent on this. And that liquefied natural gas gets people off of more carbon intensive forms such as coal, for power generation. So, but Democrat Leon Panetta, who used to be he's the former defense secretary in the Obama administration.
Mm-hmm.
He's saying that actually we need to boost these liquefied natural gas exports, which, by the way, is good for the U.S. economy because it's an export instead of importing.
Even if we build liquefied natural gas generating plants here in America, like that was supposed to be built over in Boardman, where they closed the coal plant down. They were going to build a LNG generating station, but the previous governor nixed it.
Yep.
And that was
switch, right?
Yep, that's the one.
Sorry you voted to get rid of it with another promise, but we're going to take away that promise and we're going to give you solar energy instead.
Yeah. Hey, some good news real quick. I saw Bobby posted Trump won Michigan. Yay.
Oh, okay.
Did we have any doubt? Any doubt?
No.
No.
None. Actually, the only real news out of Michigan is going to be how many people voted uncommitted in the Democrat primary that are upset with Joe Biden. Some of whom may well become Trump voters in the general election, which could hand Michigan to President Trump once again, like it was in 2016. So, yeah, good news that things are rolling along, and Joe Biden is going on late night TV shows and making a fool of himself,
oh my gosh,
making jokes about falsehoods. And yeah, it's one last thing here in Oregon. You posted about how homeowners are facing soaring premiums and few property insurance options over wildfires. This is kind of the way they squeeze you by essentially making your living cost of living unaffordable. And they're doing it to a bunch of people in rural Oregon while they refuse to harvest out of our forests, and which would actually reduce the fuel load and enact more to prevent it. They refuse to do that. They would rather make it impossible for you to afford to live in huge swaths of the state. Meanwhile, we're actually closing down sawmills. There was another one that just closed down in Philomath the other day. 100 people are going to lose their jobs. And the reason, in a state wealthy in timber that could easily be made available for these sawmills that operated for generations to be able to produce their products and in many cases export them. The high cost of logs. They cannot get a hold of affordable logs in a state that has tons of them, even ones that are just lying on the floor of the forest. Meanwhile, people can't afford to live in these places anymore because they just won't. And of course, BLM won't even put out the fires to begin with.
Yeah, and this is a bad deal because of the insurance companies that are exiting offering coverage in Oregon. So this is bad. That and it's because of the failed policies of the governors that we've had, and the legislators that we've had that are not taking care of this, and to have insurance rates being astronomical that you can't even afford to have it, and which affects properties values, because you cannot buy a property if your insurance is as much as your property payment is. It just becomes unaffordable. And this is happening in other states as well. California, it's happening in Florida. And, and I recall when this type of thing happened in California with earthquake insurance got exorbitantly high that the state had to write their own policy.
Yeah.
And so if Oregon continues down the failed policies of let it burn, the state might have to end up underwriting their own insurance policies as well for fire insurance, or go to a federal policy or something, to make, because you don't want to, well, maybe they do. I was going to say you don't want to kill total economy of the state, but maybe they do.
Well,
So they can just put solar everywhere and be happy, right?
That's right. That's what they want to radically transform it. Meanwhile, you see this picture in this article of all the smoke being generated by the fires, and you're like, now that looks like real pollution. That's real pollution. And they won't do anything.
It is. Talk about carbon going up, which carbon doesn't hurt. Carbon doesn't hurt anything.
No. So
can't believe that narrative. Well, hey, Kevin.
It's been great.
It has been great. Thank you, everybody. And share the message. Thanks for letting us know about Trump in Michigan.
Yep. And we should, I think you and Don will be on tomorrow night with the next episode of The Captive Audience. So tune in, everybody, to that. And we will look forward to seeing you tomorrow night. Have a good night, everyone.